Y'all ready for some science? People call Stu Weiss the monarch whisperer, but when I met him, he said he was in a coevolutionary relationship with the bay checker spot butterfly, which he has studied for 4 decades. It nourishes him, he nourishes it, meaning on his side. It gives him hard problems to solve, and hard problems are what he likes. Stu first started chasing butterflies as a Stanford undergrad, but in 1984, he had an aha moment. He saw how the slope of a hill, the angle of a hill, determined exactly how much sunshine the checker spot larvae would get. You could measure that topographic complexity. You could predict it. You could design for it. People take that idea as gospel now. Like we all know about microclimates. Stu's paper planted that seed. In the 90s, Stu had another aha. He realized that nitrogen spewed into the air by cars and power plants was changing California. It fertilized invasive weeds, which choked out the checker spot's host plants. Cattle grazing could keep those weeds down. Non-native species could, in this case, help the native ones. That is when Stu dove into on-the-ground conservation. He learned to work with those who are not necessarily traditional conservation allies, like power plant companies or ranchers, to get land protected. His research helped establish the legal precedent that if you're going to spew nitrogen into the air, you have to pay to mitigate it, which in turn led to a $500 million more habitat plan for Santa Clara County, which is checker spot central. So since 2006, Stu has been the science advisor to the Conservation Lands Network, which synthesizes umpteen layers of geographic data to help Bay Area land managers prioritize. It's a powerful tool, and now Stu's working on a CLN 3.0 to incorporate stewardship needs. He's clearly not done with the hard problems, and we are all better off for that. On behalf of Bay Nature, I'd like to present the 2023 Conservation Action Award to Stu Weiss.
Okay, so now I know the origin of all the recent Jerry Garcia sightings in the Bay Area. Okay, so I had a free-range childhood in a leafy green suburb of Philadelphia. My dad was an anti-war organizer, so I kind of got the activist genes and environment. And he also would take us to this place, the Wissahickon, and he blew my mind when I was 9 years old talking about this self-regenerating forest. I was just like, whoa, you mean like people don't have to do anything? And then I was 10 years old on the first Earth Day, and that kind of set my path. So I found myself at Stanford University in this field of wildflowers on Jasper Ridge Biological Reserve. And I had my first encounter with the bay checker spot butterfly. And I learned about the most important plant in the world, the dwarf plantain, the silvery plant in the foreground, which is the only plant the bay checker spot would feed on. And I owe it all to Dr. Paul Ehrlich, here being reunited with the bay checker spot after several decades of not seeing them. He put up with me for 20 years in various roles working in his lab. That included a dream job as a field assistant in the Colorado Rockies. And in his path-breaking book, Extinction, published in 1981, he recounted my experience getting bulldozed off a site in Woodside while I was collecting checker spots for a genetics sample. And that was confronting the extinction crisis, the paving over of habitats and, just wiping out species. So a little about that time, I learned about the proposal to put a golf course in here at Edgewood Park. And they can't do that. And a lot of other people felt the same way, so the Save Edgewood Park Coalition was formed. Took over a decade to secure the park against this golf course, and then this organization morphed into the Friends of Edgewood, which is like the most amazing Friends organization devoted to a beautiful piece of land. My other undergraduate major was Stanford Band, and somehow I got in line of the camera here. That's me with the saxophone there. And that was the end, that was the end of my band career there. I took that crazy energy, which, you have in your 20s, and put it into whitewater rafting, which, teaches a lot of life lessons. Listen to the river, dodge the rocks and holes, and work with the current, not against it. Wait for your chance to make your move and don't struggle too far, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of life lessons in the most beautiful places on the planet for about 20 years. Really hardcore doing that. In 1984, started working down in the mother lode population of bay checker spot butterflies and serpentine grasslands down in South San Jose, now known as Coyote Ridge. Spent a lot of time tracking these checker spot larvae as they munched tender baby Plantago erecta greens and curled up in the sun to raise their body temperatures and digest their food. So, they're fuzzy, warm, and very hungry caterpillars. That's what we found out. And I adopted some of that California lifestyle. Instead of Plantago erecta, I've got a Sierra Nevada pale ale there and a different thermoregulatory strategy. And, this whole idea that the way the sun falls on the landscape is utterly predictable from geometry. And that led to a paper, Sun Slope and Butterflies. It's become a bit of a citation classic in the field, and introduced a lot of people to the term topoclimate and phenology, which are now widely used in ecology and conservation and become a basis for climate change research. And I got to spend years wandering around in these places, enjoying the coefficient of beauty with all the wildflowers, and sharing it with a nice herd of tule elk lording over Silicon Valley. Came back from the brink of extinction. And, encounter the cows, and we quickly found out that the cows were like the keystone species out there. That without the cows, this beautiful field of wildflowers would turn into a sea of Italian ryegrass. We knew that in the 1980s, but we didn't know why. Then when I went back to grad school, I was in the ecosystem ecology course with Peter Vitusik, and he gave a lecture about dry nitrogen deposition. I mean, sure, smog is nitrogen fertilizer. And I'm like, aha, there it is. Light bulb goes off in my head. Next thing I knew, the whole Las Vegas Strip was going off because of such a revelation. So I published a paper in 1999. That became the best available science that was applied to mitigation for this gas-fired power plant, the Metcalf Energy Center. That set a precedent. Then when Highway 101 the following year was being widened, part of the mitigation was a commitment to develop a HCP, a habitat conservation plan. So then we got really busy advocating. So we put out this color glossy brochure with the California Native Plant Society, distributed a few thousand of them over the years. We started taking people up there. We invited all the elected officials up there, wildlife agency, a lot of the public. A docent program got started. We called it Operation Flower Power. And it's, literal grassroots lobbying here. And we blew people's mind because they had no idea that was up there. great media coverage. It got a half page in the Washington Post in 2006. And then when push came to shove, when we had to get the final approval of the elected bodies, we formed a coalition called Habitat Conservation Now. One of the activities was sending hundreds of these postcards to the elected officials saying, support the HCP. And then on October 3rd, 2013, the implementing agreement was signed, giving birth to the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Plan. So this paper, interesting science, ended up generating about $700 million of mitigation. And the checker spot has become sort of a poster child for nitrogen deposition impacts on biodiversity, but there's a lot more to do. Got to get this out of just Santa Clara County. Another fallout of this was a recognition that the ranching community and the conservation community had more in common than they had differences. So the California Rangeland Conservation Coalition used this work as a basis for this new paradigm about working lands. Then here back at Edgewood, kind of ended up being the same old song here, that the checker spot population there went extinct in 2002. And it was obvious on the ground that the habitat had gotten taken over by the Italian ryegrass. And it turns out that it was the fumigation by ammonia coming out of the cars going by on 280 at high speeds that was the key fertilization. And I call that the drive-by extinction. We've probably all made our contributions there. So we worked to manage the habitat, reintroduced the bay checker spot butterfly to great fanfare in 2007. Here's a press gaggle. Just Friends of Edgewood just worked it out just great. And we dominated the news cycle. We were on every TV station and a lot of print articles. But it turns out it didn't work that first time. So we went back and did it again, and now we have a small population that's hanging on. We're waiting for that boom year to occur. So it's still in progress. Then in 2006, I got a phone call from Ann Buell of the Coastal Conservancy asking me, do you know anybody who could be the science advisor to the Upland Habitat Goals project we've been talking about? And well, I could do that. And that led to the Conservation Lands Network, which it's like a compilation, a meticulous compilation of the biogeography of the Bay Area, the conservation geography of the Bay Area, and trying to set a vision for what a truly effective conservation lands network would be. And it's been through 3 iterations, and we're going for the 4th one. So we did the math. We got 30 by 20 in the Bay Area, so we're way ahead of people. And we're en route to an ultimate goal, or even an interim of 50 by 50. I owe so much to my Creekside staff, Crystal, Jimmy, Marissa, and Chris, and there they are hard at work, counting wildflowers. We do have, our corporate motto is sure beats working, which SBW happens to be my initials, so. Some of the species we're working with here, the Metcalf Canyon jewel flower to around paintbrush. We saved the San Mateo thorn mint in the upper right from extinction through intervention, Presidio clarkia, white-rayed pentakita, and then we're like all into lupins these days because it's the host plant for the endangered mission blue butterfly, which we've been working with other agencies to introduce and augment populations. Work with the Kino checker spot in Southern California. And then I've been working with monarch butterflies for a few decades now, and we're at the point where we can do designer overwintering habitat to create those right microclimates and not leave it to chance anymore. The topo climate work got me, and climate change work got me out in the Great Basin with the ancient bristlecone pines. And, you know, I want to deeply thank my wife, Lisi. We met at a conservation biology reception at San Francisco State. About a month later, we decided that we had fallen in love at the Grateful Dead New Year's show. And here she is last weekend celebrating my 62nd birthday at Greens. And I owe a huge amount to my older brother. We recruited him to run our GIS system at Stanford. And he had come from an archaeology and a computer engineering background. And when asked whether, you know, so why should we hire you? You do archaeology. He said, oh, no problem. The verbs are the same, but the nouns are different. And, you know, tragically, we lost him to mental illness a few years ago. Yeah, so, you know, my errant moment got memorialized in bronze just up the hill here. But, you know, the more deliberate legacy is this living legacy of biodiversity. And to have been the catalyst that led all of these organizations to, you know, put the resources into conserving this incredible place on Coyote Ridge. And this is the way conservation is going these days. It's these big, you know, multi-agency efforts. So let's share a little bit of love with the Bay checker spot butterflies here doing their thing. It's nurtured me. I've been nurturing it. And maybe we can raise our net in you know, celebration of some success, but kind of like the true heroes on Iwo Jima that this photograph is referencing. It was only the beginning of the end of the beginning. It was not the end of the battle, and we have so much more work to do. So please, let's all, you know, keep doing it and amp up our efforts. Thank you.